From the outside, the mansion looked like something out of a dream, gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a garden that stretched beyond sight. But behind the tall iron gates lived a secret, carefully buried under years of lies. A billionaire's daughter, born blind, raised in silence, and hidden from the world. Everyone believed it was fate, an unchangeable tragedy. But then, a new maid arrived, a maid who wasn't supposed to question, wasn't supposed to notice. Yet one small act of compassion unraveled everything. What she uncovered would shake the entire household and reveal a truth darker than blindness itself. The Harrington estate was known across the city as a symbol of wealth and power. Victor Harrington, a self-made billionaire, had built an empire in real estate, and his reputation as a ruthless businessman was matched only by his obsession with perfection. Everything in his world had to shine: his home, his reputation, and even his family. But behind closed doors, there was Elizabeth, his 6-year-old daughter. Born blind, she lived in a world without color, confined mostly to her nursery. The public knew almost nothing about her. Victor rarely spoke of his child. To him, her blindness was not just a tragedy, it was a flaw, one he desperately tried to hide from investors, friends, and even distant relatives. Elizabeth's days were quiet and repetitive. Nannies rotated through the household, but none stayed long. They left with whispers about the coldness of the house, about the way Victor's wife, Margaret, seemed detached, and about Elizabeth's strange behavior. Some claimed the child wasn't just blind, but also sickly, fragile, and unfit for the outside world. When the new maid, Naomi, first entered the mansion, she felt the weight of this silence immediately. She had come from a modest background, a young black woman searching for stability after years of struggle. For her, the job was supposed to be temporary, just a paycheck. But from her very first day, Naomi felt something was wrong. The other staff members warned her, "Do your duties, keep quiet, don't ask questions." Victor had eyes everywhere, and no one dared to cross him. Still, Naomi couldn't ignore the loneliness in Elizabeth's nursery, the untouched toys, the curtains always drawn, and the child sitting quietly in her chair, clutching a teddy bear like it was the only friend she had. Naomi's heart ached. She had grown up with little herself, but at least she'd had freedom. Elizabeth, despite her father's billions, seemed imprisoned. And yet, there was something about the girl's movements, the way her head tilted when Naomi entered, the way her fingers tightened around the bear, that made Naomi wonder, could a child so blind be so aware? Over the weeks, Naomi's duties placed her close to Elizabeth. She noticed the small details others dismissed. When Naomi dusted the shelves, Elizabeth would turn her head toward the sound, tracking it with uncanny precision. When Naomi changed the flowers in the vase, Elizabeth would wrinkle her nose as if she could smell the difference instantly. But one afternoon, something happened that Naomi couldn't ignore. As she polished the brass lamp by the window, sunlight caught the metal and reflected across the room. To Naomi's shock, Elizabeth flinched, her eyes darting instinctively toward the light. It was only for a second, but it was real. Naomi froze. If Elizabeth was blind, how could she react to light? The mansion's rules were strict. Maids were forbidden from questioning Elizabeth's condition, but Naomi couldn't let it go. The next day, she tried a small test. While feeding Elizabeth lunch, she casually lifted a bright red spoon instead of the usual silver one. Elizabeth hesitated. Her tiny hands hovered over the tray, then moved directly toward the spoon. Naomi's heart raced. She repeated her tests carefully, always in secret. A yellow ball rolled across the carpet. Elizabeth's eyes followed. A candle flickered near her bed. Elizabeth turned toward it. Piece by piece, Naomi built a terrifying conclusion. Elizabeth could see. But if that were true, then why had the Harringtons hidden it? Naomi's nights grew restless. She remembered the harsh tone of Victor, the cold indifference of Margaret. Were they lying to their daughter, convincing her she was blind? Or worse, were they drugging her, manipulating her to believe in her own helplessness? The truth gnawed at Naomi, but speaking out felt dangerous. Victor's power wasn't just money, it was fear. Staff who asked too many questions disappeared from the estate overnight, replaced without explanation. Naomi began to watch her back, convinced that Victor's eyes were always on her. Still, she couldn't stay silent. One stormy evening, as thunder rattled the windows, Naomi whispered to Elizabeth, asking if she ever saw things. At first, the child stayed quiet, clutching her bear. But then, with a trembling voice, she confessed. She saw flashes, shapes, colors, but she wasn't supposed to tell anyone. Daddy said she was blind. Mommy said too. Every time she mentioned seeing, they punished her. Naomi's blood turned cold. This wasn't just neglect, it was abuse. Elizabeth was being forced to live in darkness, trapped in a lie that served only her parents' obsession with control. The breaking point came during Victor's grand charity gala, hosted in the mansion itself. The house buzzed with laughter, music, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Powerful men and women filled the ballroom, praising Victor's generosity. It was an illusion of perfection, one Naomi could barely stomach. Elizabeth was kept upstairs, locked in her nursery as usual. But Naomi, unable to bear the thought of the little girl isolated during the celebration, slipped away from her duties and checked on her. She found her curled on her chair, tears streaking her face. Naomi's instinct overpowered her fear. She gently pulled the curtains wide open, letting moonlight spill into the room. Elizabeth gasped, her eyes widening in awe at the glow. She whispered, almost in disbelief, "I see a light, Mommy." But she wasn't her mother. She was the only one brave enough to give her that gift. In that instant, the door burst open. Victor stood there, his face twisted with rage. Behind him, Margaret lingered, pale and silent. Naomi froze as Victor's voice thundered through the room. He accused her of breaking rules, of filling the child's head with dangerous fantasies. His fury was uncontrollable. He declared that Elizabeth was blind, that this truth was unshakable. To suggest otherwise was betrayal. But Elizabeth, emboldened by the light, cried out. She could see. She told her father about the colors, the shapes, the flashes she had always hidden. Her small voice cut through the storm like a blade. Victor's mask cracked. For the first time, the ruthless billionaire looked cornered. Guests from downstairs had heard the commotion and began to gather by the door, whispers spreading. Naomi stood tall, heart pounding, as the room filled with witnesses. There was no hiding anymore. The secret was exposed. The aftermath shattered the Harrington household. Within days, the story spread beyond the mansion. Reporters uncovered years of silence, questioning why a billionaire would hide his child's gift and force her into darkness. Psychologists, teachers, and advocates for children's rights swarmed the case. The Harrington name, once synonymous with wealth and power, became a symbol of cruelty and control. Victor fought back, calling it slander, insisting Elizabeth was blind. But medical examinations proved otherwise. Elizabeth had a mild visual impairment, yes, but she was far from blind. She could see enough to live, to play, to experience the world that her parents had stolen from her. For Elizabeth, the journey was just beginning. The world outside was overwhelming at first. The colors too bright, the sounds too sharp. But Naomi stayed by her side, guiding her gently. She taught her how to trust her own eyes, how to explore without fear. Victor, however, faced consequences he couldn't buy his way out of. His empire crumbled under lawsuits, investigations, and public outrage. Margaret, who had remained silent all those years, retreated from the spotlight, unable to bear the shame. But Naomi? She became more than a maid. She became a hero, though she never sought the title. For Elizabeth, she was the first person who had truly seen her, not as a flaw, not as a secret, but as a child full of potential. And yet the story leaves a haunting question lingering. How many other children live in silence, their truths buried under lies too heavy to lift? How many are told they cannot, when in fact they can? So